It should come as no surprise that Pokemon Legends Arceus is very important to me. It was my first Pokemon experience in years, having eschewed the rest of Generation 8 and run Pokemon Go dry, and despite me dropping it around Daybreak's release, it clearly left a lasting impression. Now, with 2 years of hindsight and a new Legends game on the way, I thought I'd take a look back at Pokemon Legends Arceus, the first Pokemon game to really break the boundaries and give it the send-off it deserves. Unless Legends EA ends up being bad, in which case I'll probably just stick with this one. Before we get into it, let's talk scope. I'm not an expert on Pokemon, nor am I an expert in Pokemon. I haven't played all of the games, so I'll be evaluating this game strictly on its own merits and only referring to past games for context. The point of this video isn't to beat down on the broader Pokemon franchise or its creators, it's to assess Pokemon Legends Arceus as a work of art. We have enough ground to cover anyway. Notably, I'm excluding Daybreak from the discussion, which I'll explain later when I discuss Daybreak. I'm also completely worthless at this game, so your mileage may vary on topics like difficulty, tutorials, and advanced mechanics. Oh, and I'm calling it PLA from now on, so you can't get on my case about the pronunciation. All words are made up anyway. Speaking of words, huge shout out to Shugels for inspiring this video with his monstrous 7 and 11 hour Pokemon analyses, and my proofreaders for donating their time and attention to this hubristic nightmare project. This analysis is split into 8 loosely themed chapters with 2 subchapters each, all of which are timestamped in the description. You can also find my sources there, and any corrections or clarifications in the pinned comment. Without further ado, let's start a new file. And immediately confront God itself. It describes itself as the all-knowing Arceus, then concedes that it doesn't know my name or what I look like. This is just the character select screen. You have the choice of 8 predetermined characters, at least for now. 4 of them male, 4 of them female. This game has an in-depth character customizer, but I guess God is on a budget right now. The name entry is similarly and perhaps expectably shallow. This one is irreversible though, and I don't appreciate how it capitalizes my typically lowercase name at the start of sentences. Your name only comes up so much after the campaign, but I don't care to defend this carelessness. God tells me to seek out all Pokemon, throws me through a space-time rift to the middle of nowhere, and our adventure begins. There's even a fancy cinematic to go with it. Cute. I am fast-forwarding it though, it's long. Shit, he's British. I'll admit, the sudden tone shift got me pretty good, and it effectively bridges the gap between divine mission from God and glorified bug catching. We're introduced to Professor Laventon and his 3 starters on the bluntly named Prelude Beach, and engage in some stock dialogue. He's, unsurprisingly, bewildered at our impromptu arrival and decides to take us under his wing. In contrast, the starters apparently had this in the calendar and bolted for front row seats. Get used to these inexplicable plot contrivances. The game needs the starters on this beach, so it chalks it up to divine intervention. Laventon says my name must have a lovely meaning. It does, by the way, and introduces himself as something of a Pokemon professor while the Pokemon he's professing are busy running away. This leads into our first catching tutorial, but not before grabbing the all-important ARC phone. This is your phone from the future, now with a custom God-powered operating system. You know a story is going to be great when it immediately throws time travel at you. This could literally not be more contrived. There is no rhyme or reason to your phone not only being taken with you through time, but receiving modifications from God along the way. It's used as a crutch to present modern UI elements and contextualize impossible video game logic as divine intervention. Providing an explanation is thoughtful, but it's just more impossible video game logic, and this celestial favoritism makes the storytelling a little vapid sometimes. Why did that just happen? I don't know, God did it. It gives the game a pass to rationalize anything without thinking it through. We catch up to Laventon, who gives us a brief Pokédex-like rundown of the starters for this game. This is a really enchanting moment. The arena is a nice grounded setting, catching some Pokemon ourselves this early on is refreshing, and I love that they're allowed to act like wild Pokemon. It's a nice, albeit brief, sneak peek behind the increasingly over-threaded tutorial curtain. Next up is the hammy and impossibly vague Pokeball mechanism explanation, which it makes sense to gloss over the non-existent logistics of, and its corresponding catching system. It's not particularly complicated. You ready a Pokeball with ZR, aim with the right stick, and release ZR to throw. The catching system is one of PLA's greatest strengths, largely thanks to its instant and consistent fun factor, but also due to how it informs the rest of the game. Everything is built on the back of the Pokeball, allowing this glorified carrying case some surprising depth. I firmly believe that the less your Pokemon feel like bits and bytes, the better the game is for it. There are exceptions, of course, but if I can't bring myself to care about the Pokemon, why bother playing with them? Despite not directly affecting Pokemon themselves, the tactility of Pokeballs makes Pokemon feel more genuine by breaking down the barriers between them and you. It feels like you caught the Pokemon, not just your Pokeball. This tutorial puts that in focus, even in its simplified state. It does teach that Pokemon can break out, but I'd argue that more intricacies could have been rolled in to consolidate future sequences. After the catching tutorial, Laventon pitches his dream of the Pokédex, a catalog of every Pokemon living in a region. Framing the game around completing the region's first ever Pokédex is genius. Gotta catch 'em all is a potent slogan for a reason, and a uniquely captivating motive with Pokemon's diverse and iconic roster that PLA does well to focalize. It's not a blank check though, it becomes a never-ending slog without consistently new and rewarding experiences along the way. It's a great setup that requires rigorous follow-through. For now, we take the Jubilife village to hopefully not die soon, either from the wilderness or from that unexplained storm above Mount Coronet. Kind of a non sequitur cutscene, but whatever. We're guided down the main hall of Jubilife where your walk speed is capped to match Laventon's. I have mixed feelings on this sequence, but as a whole I think I'm for it. The brief panoramic shots around the area are nice and quaint, and the walk down the brown carpet is an organic way to ostracize us, having the townsfolk murmuring about our sudden appearance and strange outfit. This is a place we'll come to know as home, so this slightly bitter introduction gives us a ground floor to work upwards from. I don't think this scene was entirely necessary, but it does set up some later story beats, and it's pretty seamless. That is, until Laventon suddenly sprints off to the Galaxy Hall and leaves you to navigate the remaining 10 steps to the Wallflower. Why are we learning how to navigate on this road after just being led through 3/4 of it? Anyway, we take a left with pinpoint precision to meet Benny and Akari. Benny is the manager of the Wallflower, the only operating restaurant in the region, which leaves an instinctive imprint thanks to its signature and singular potato mochi dish. This will become a frequent touchpoint, particularly when he starts taking the Sootfoot root ingredient for Pokédollars, but it's left appropriately understated for what amounts to one table and one guy. Benny acts the same way as the other townsfolk, leading me to further question the existence of that scene, but Akari is slightly more considerate. She'd be replaced by Ray if I'd picked a female character, whose dialogue is a little too cockney for my tastes. I do find it strange that your rival depends on your character's gender, but I'd rather this approach than having 2 copy-pasted rivals on every playthrough. Akari's design takes after Dawn from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, which is a running trend for this game's cast. Almost all prominent characters are implied to be ancestors of characters in Diamond and Pearl, with this game being set in a newly developing Sinnoh. The difference this makes to the story is, in practical terms, 0. It's basically just fan service for longtime fans and a tenuous thread to modern Sinnoh. It's a bit too on the nose to make total sense in universe, but it barely matters. Cyllene, the counterpart to Cyrus, is introduced next. She's mostly here to tell you that you're going to die, but I think you can glean a lot about PLA's demographic from her assertion that your player character is 15. In the original games, Red and Blue are 11, approximately the age of the target demographic. Ruby and Sapphire's protagonists are 12, since it was meant to appeal to fans of the originals who had grown a few years. The more mature Black and White's characters landed at 14, before the beginner-friendly Sun and Moon put them back to 11. 15 is the oldest a player character has been in a mainline game, and I think that shows that its target audience is older too. It also makes Cyllene forcing you to work for her not unsalvageably corrupt, so that's nice. From here, we get a character building scene at the Wallflower, which is functionally pointless, but I've always liked it for building towards a Jubilife that feels like home. This is where Laventon first brings up that this place is called Hisui. My initial response to this was, no it isn't, it's called Sinnoh. To my knowledge, nobody in Diamond and Pearl ever referenced the name Hisui, and while the name change is acknowledged and somewhat historically rooted, it's never quite justified in this context. It comes off like a marketing loophole. What do we call the Pokemon that live here? Old Sinonian Pokemon? We can't put that on the back of the box, so let's call them Hisuian instead. Disregarding how unwieldy Hisuian is as a word, it's just a direct transcription of a Japanese word meaning hidden and profound, which is about as surface level technically true as it gets. I understand the desire to distinguish the two renditions of Sinnoh, but this solution creates more questions than answers. A couple story beats later, Cylene gifts you a house furnished with soft tutorials. Survey tips are PLA's hint system, popping up when prompted and being archived in the menu. This could have made for a perfectly non-intrusive opt-in tutorial system, but you're forced to see them at least once, making them explicitly intrusive. In terms of UI design, the menus fulfill their purpose well. They're easy to read, their style doesn't clash with the game's DIY-ish aesthetic, and there are some considerate accessibility features. The option to freely revisit the tutorial with survey tips is appreciated, and the game takes pains to accommodate hard-of-hearing players with independent volume sliders for music, cries, and sound effects, and the dynamic range feature to adjust the breadth of the soundscape. Unfortunately, by and large, PLA's accessibility options are insufficient and frustratingly archaic. PLA prefers to bake accessibility into its design and let players customize their experience through their gameplay decisions. And while there are some contexts where that's appropriate, this game doesn't even let you customize the controls. The Switch does have an integrated control customization feature nowadays, but just looking at the controls demonstrates why this doesn't work. They completely change on the overworld versus on the battlefield. Some buttons have 3 or 4 actions mapped to them depending on context. Potentially forcing the player to go through rigorous menuing every time they send out a Pokemon is a huge impediment to a fun playing experience, and the ability to remap actions rather than buttons would unambiguously fix this. Ultimately, aside from the lack of control customization, PLA's accessibility is fine. It's not quite industry standard, and it will inevitably leave some people behind, but it at least covers for hard-of-hearing audiences and takes measures to alleviate other accessibility concerns in its gameplay. PLA's font isn't customizable, but it's easy to read, does not auto-scroll, and is placed on a plain white background the majority of the time. There are no colorblind settings, but color distinctions are almost always accompanied with a symbol or audio cue. And difficulty options are kind of a whole thing. Still, they should have done better. You're also told about the autosave feature here, which is more helpful than it should be. You'll get what I mean. While your character is sleeping, you bear witness to a multicolored space-time rift-born 2-second single-point lightning storm on a big tree. Makes sense to me, big trees are prone to that kind of thing. The characters don't seem to make much of it, so it probably won't matter, but hey, the graphics were nice. After an uneventful sleep, you're called to the Galaxy Hall to prove your worth with an introductory mission. Immediately upon arrival, your attention is pointed towards a man who just failed his and seems to be in pretty severe pain. The game plays it safe, not showing the character or using any gruesome language, obviously the right thing to do, but between that and Akari stating that your mission has never been completed successfully, PLA has no qualms with challenging your mortality. Pokemon is always fighting an uphill battle, as a franchise largely targeted towards kids where your little teddy bear can be obliterated by a guillotine, but PLA turns the tables. Hisui is an unsanitized, borderline barbaric world where death is just part of the backdrop. Cylene tells you that if you reject your mission, you'll be left to die in the wild, and Yojiro seems to imply that accepting the mission could kill you anyway. PLA has a unique opportunity to explore those possibilities, but it doesn't offer much nuance outside of you can die, your Pokemon can die, and I am evil. The bluntness ironically adds an edge to the game's dialogue that intensifies the world and raises the stakes, but the obsession with death is a little cheap. Once Cylene is done edgelording your character, Laventon steps in to give you a starter Pokemon. Much like the name, the starter tradition is irreplaceable. The moment you receive your starter is truly precious, much more so than your first Pokemon being a Starly or something, only strengthened by the undeniably powerful bonds people forge with their starters throughout the game. However, the sequence comes with its share of obstacles, primarily how and why it's even happening. PLA might have stumbled here, what with the unexplored wilderness that these Pokemon don't even live in, but the recent immigrant Laventon having accrued these Pokemon in other regions makes perfect sense. And that unexplored wilderness basically covers the why of it. Starters can also be over-centralizing. They tower over most wild encounters with their unique typings, signature moves, and relatively early access to final evolutions with 500 plus base stat totals. Thankfully, PLA's difficulty balancing and increased focus on catching wild Pokemon provide ample incentive to diversify your team. Overleveling isn't a be-all end-all, one Pokemon sweeps are rarely feasible, and your team will naturally populate as you catch Pokemon. There isn't much cinematic grandeur to this sequence, but the game is quaint enough to get away with this subdued approach. PLA is unusual in that its starters are returning Pokemon from previous generations, which I'd argue is justified. These are already fan favorites, they're valuable later generation representation, and they evolve into unique Hisuian forms anyway. They picked a great batch of Pokemon for this game too. Cyndaquil's gorgeous fire spikes make for a great showcase of PLA's expansive animation repertoire. Rowlet is an all-star Pokemon in every way and a shoo-in for Generation 7 representation, and Oshawott honestly just deserved a second chance. I picked Rowlet on my first playthrough, but I'm going with Cyndaquil for this one. Good fire types are harder to come by, and I've always wanted an excuse to use this little guy. I don't appreciate how unhappy the other two starters look afterwards. The game is trying to be funny, making them sad to work for Laventon, but it just makes me feel bad for them. Before embarking, I took some time to explore the medical corps, sans Yojiro, who I'm assuming died during your conversation with Silene. The Nurse Joy reference makes it seem like a Pokemon Center stand-in, but it's nothing more than a reference. We meet Volo outside, whose resemblance to Cynthia from Diamond and Pearl immediately sets off alarm bells that this will be an important character. Volo is a member of the Ginkgo Guild, a group of traveling merchants in Hisui, and as such he drops a quick advertisement into his bizarre dialogue. Don't get me wrong, I love Volo. He has a great, distinctive design and will come into his own as the story progresses. In his debut scene, though, his portrayal is oddly obtuse. He's ostensibly friendly, but his snobby, holier-than-thou attitude is a strange choice for a character we'll be spending so much time with. His animations are just kinda weird. Why does he do this pose anyway? I recommend keeping an open mind on Volo because his character definitely improves in later appearances, but I wish this one was more likable. Maybe that's just my taste in men talking, I don't know. Regardless, he challenges you to your first proper Pokemon battle, letting you intuit the intricacies at your own pace. At least for now. First off, you can run around. It doesn't do a thing mechanically, but why wouldn't you be able to run around, right? You get knocked over if an attack hits you, which is cute, but the real value of free movement is the accompanying camera control. You get to control the cinematic grandeur, or lack thereof, in any fight at any time. It's easy to overlook, but it's another potential barrier between player and Pokemon dismantled. Mechanically, there's one thing you can do in this battle. Click Fight and click Quick Attack. Likewise, Volo's Togepi will always click Tackle, and barring some anti-miracle, it seems like you always win. When you do a physical attack, your Pokemon moves to within striking distance of its opponent. I didn't even think about this on my first playthrough because it's so natural, but it works wonders to sell the impact of every attack. Rarely if ever does an attack feel weightless or artificial, beyond the obvious concession that not every one of the hundreds of attacks can be masterfully animated. They're simple stock animations, but I'm proud to say that they're consistently eye-catching and believable. Good work, PLA! The real magic happens when the screen turns black after battle. With no obtrusive dialogue, Cyndaquil gains experience, levels up, and learns a new move. The player isn't guided through any of this. If you want to see what new move Cyndaquil got, or how its stats have improved, look it up in the menu. I cannot stress this enough. This seemingly minor consideration works wonders to improve the game's pacing. Battles never go a second longer than they need to, allowing gameplay to transition seamlessly in and out of them. It's simple, it's legible, it looks great, feels great, everything. Frankly, I can't imagine PLA flowing nearly as well without it. That same time-saving philosophy also applies to the move pool system. At certain levels determined by species, new moves are added to a Pokemon's available move pool to be freely swapped in or out at any time via the menu. I'll concede that learning moves through level up is fairly reductive, but the move pool system might be the best execution of that premise. It promotes experimentation, heightens visual clarity in the aftermath of fights, and makes perfect sense in universe. Are Pokemon really so stupid that they can't know how to use Thunder without forgetting Thunderbolt? You could run into redundancy if too many moves objectively supersede others, but PLA's move pools are carefully considered so every move has a unique use case. Better yet, the customization means Pokemon are never confined to one niche. For example, Pokemon with movesets tooled specifically for catching can still be useful in trainer battles with a bit of menuing. Those menus are also excellent, giving you all relevant information and not taking up any more time than needed. You can change your Pokemon's moveset between every major battle while preserving the game flow. This feature is fantastic on its own, but the way the rest of PLA builds around it makes it revolutionary. Pokemon don't evolve automatically either. When they've met their evolution requirement, a simple Can Evolve notification pops up and you can choose to evolve them via the menu whenever. Again, this is the only way that makes sense. Pokemon can evolve in many different contexts, necessitating a flexible system, and PLA needs evolution to be fundamentally driven by the player. You might want to delay your Pokemon's evolution until you finish conducting research for them, or until you'll get the evolution you want, or until you're safe to let your guard down, or forever, for any number of reasons. The trade-off is that inattentive players might miss the Can Evolve signal, but PLA kinda demands full attention anyway. It's an invaluable system, and while it can be chalked up to a simple UI design choice, its positive impact on the game feel cannot be overstated. One common gripe with PLA is its lack of traditional trainer battles, which Volo acknowledges in his post-fight dialogue. Since Pokeballs are so uncommon, he doesn't often find competent trainers to battle with, and neither will you. It's a bit rich from a man with one Togepi, but it suggests that trainer scarcity was a conscious design choice. He then gives you some basic potions, which keenly restores 60 HP, just enough to warrant crafting when not out of begrudging necessity, at the negligible cost of franchise parity. Potions never appealed to me, but their inclusion is a no-brainer. In another instance of PLA clawing at in-world explanations for its out-of-world mechanics, Akari says that the destination selection doubles as an emergency location tracker. If you tell the guardsman rest where you're headed and get knocked out in the field, he'll know where to find you. So you don't die, really. That's good. It's a harmless, yet unnecessary, yet charming little piece of flavor text to humanize Res a bit, which is appreciated for such a common presence with zero character. I don't envy Res. He's essentially a talking warp point, so he has to choose between being memorable but wasting your time and being efficient but boring. He's smart to opt for the latter. It comes off as a no-nonsense, level-headed personality, fitting for a guardsman, without bogging down the destination selection process. For now, there's only one destination to select, the Obsidian Fieldlands. We've seen this place before in the Thunderstorm cinematic, and there's not much to see anyway. The Obsidian Fieldlands is PLA's basic grassy area, a mostly blank canvas to ease the player into the moment-to-moment gameplay. That's not to say it's without spectacle, but it's more reserved than the other areas. In modern-day Sinnoh, it becomes an assortment of grassy routes, with landmarks like Lake Verity and Orboro Tunnel pinning it to the southwesternmost corner. Our first stop is the base camp, which not only holds all of your necessities, a bed for passing time, a bench for crafting, a chest for inventory, but also acts as a force field against wild Pokemon attacks. I won't mince words on this, it's a necessary feature and it serves its purpose exactly as it should. The game sure loves to mince words though. Welcome to the most extensive tutorial section in the game, the trial. This wide shot is nice, but the chapter's already started, so we can move on now. A Bidoof careens directly into your path and proverbially begs to be captured. Hisui is lucky to inhabit such a quintessentially stupid Pokemon for this sequence. You can hold down ZL to focus on a wild Pokemon and lock your reticle to their position. For example, I can stand 2 inches away from this Bidoof, press ZL, then smack it downside the head and catch it instantly. Side note, extremely close range catches are surprisingly finicky, so I wouldn't recommend it. Focusing is a necessary and largely intuitive mechanic, but PLA should know better than to require a button to be held down. The lack of an option to have ZL toggle the focus state is an unnecessary failure of accessibility. Starly is a step up from Bidoof in that it has wings to fly away on. To remedy this, you'll want to find some tall grass and crouch down in it. This reutilization of tall grass is obvious in retrospect, but absolutely brilliant as a derivation from Pokemon's legacy. These grass patches are integral to the brand, as stupid as that sounds, so what do you do with them when Pokemon roam freely? In PLA, the player is the one hiding in the tall grass, waiting for the opportunity to leap out at a Pokemon. You are the Pokemon. Isn't that cool? Action-adventure games can struggle to make stealth both fun and believable. In reality, no competent guard or enemy will fail to hear your footsteps as you run up behind them. Some concessions have to be made for stealth to be remotely feasible. I'd argue PLA doesn't have this problem. Tall grass doesn't solve the problem single-handedly, plenty of mechanics are doing their part, but the existence of a natural, in-world source of vision obscuration that Pokemon fans have been primed to understand for decades does the heavy lifting here. Well, that and the fact that you're sneaking up on a bird. I get a backstrike on this Starly, which plays a cool sound effect. Remember that, it will be on the test. Just before the third, maybe fourth, catching tutorial, we have the tree tutorial. Akari recites this famous quote supposedly from Captain Silene. Have an item at the ready but want to send out a Pokemon? Press X. Have a Pokemon at the ready but want to throw an item? Press X. You don't need me to tell you that Silene didn't say that. I think the game is trying to be funny here, and it got a laugh out of me, but why not make a survey tip pop up for this? I promptly ignore the tree. I'm thankful that it's not required, partially because it's an intuitive process that doesn't need to be rigorously tutorialized, and partially because it would have made me feel like an idiot. Ah! A Shinx! Of course I got scared, game, it's a Shinx. An indicator appears above its head when you target it to show its catch difficulty. I like that it's conveyed with both shape and color, even if it is small and easy to ignore. Unfortunately, this Shinx's catch difficulty is mad at me. Pokemon get bouncy when they're mad at you, rendering your Pokeballs useless until you throw your own Pokemon and initiate a battle. At this point, they lose their bouncy and can even be damaged to increase their catch rate. To tastefully demonstrate this point, I autopilot this Shinx right into its grave. Just know you're not alone if you did this too. When a second identical Shinx materializes in my wake, I send out Starly, which is so obviously stupid that PLA takes pity on me. Pokemon occasionally waste their turn looking around. This is usually for balancing. In Shinx's case, it's to guarantee that the player can catch it. Unless they're using a Starly. After its previous gambit of nothing, it suddenly uses Quick Attack twice in a row, giving us a soft introduction to the turn order system. Surely this will be rigorously tutorialized later. For now, I throw a Desperation Pokeball and a 100% catch chance, and thus concludes this sarcasm-drenched tutorial. I don't hate this section. PLA has lots to explain, and I like the 3-tiered structure, but Akari bogs it down with the constant interruptions. Replacing her dialogue with a few survey tips pop-ups would have illustrated her points better, not to mention rolling it in with the other 3-tiered catching tutorial at Prelude Beach. You only have to go through this sequence once though, so it barely impacts my enjoyment of the game. As we're being cutscened back to the Galaxy Hall, Akari touches on something Pokemon games tend to struggle with, the 6 Pokemon party limit. The idea is that you need to be incredibly skilled to lead multiple Pokemon. If this is meant to be true, it isn't. We already have 4 Pokemon for almost no work when Akari says this. That said, Pokemon games flow better when trainers have a few Pokemon each, so the game opts to feign rationale for why they don't all stock up on Magikarp rather than address the underlying dissonance. It's a missed opportunity, but it only manifests as a minor discrepancy that, frankly, isn't worth marring the game for. Cyllene opens with, "It seems we won't have to leave you to die after all." Hello would have been nice. She gives you your first piece of equipable clothing and the Survey Corps outfit, which I think is supposed to build rapport, but the subtlety is lost on her. You're forced to change into your uniform to progress the story, which I think is potent. It draws a clear line at your employment while fostering something of a wardrobe tutorial. There will be plenty of clothes to change into later on, so this isn't quite as useless as it seems. Hey, those shoes look familiar. Oddly enough, you aren't given a hat. Cyllene equips it for you via cutscene. This recycled walk animation gives her a real sense of weightiness, as in she's about to run into you with her full weight before the screen fades. Damn, those shoes still look familiar. Don't bother talking to any NPCs outside of the main cast yet, by the way. Jubilife is still in its tutorial state, where the unique character interactions are deactivated, and they instead recite stock quotes that sometimes allude to their eventual roles. It's a safe approach. Commander Kamado meets you in his office at the top floor and immediately makes an impression. He's analogous to Professor Rowan, now with the gusto to engage in hand-to-hand combat with a child. He does win though, I'll give him that. He certainly seems important, but much like a real boss, he only appears infrequently to discuss your performance and be vaguely xenophobic. Cyllene then introduces Star Ranks, your character's progression system. You earn research points by making progress on your Pokedex, which result in higher star ranks and greater rewards. Your current rank is nothing, and your reward is the ability to craft Pokeballs, one of PLA's most foundational gameplay pillars. Where Cyllene introduces the concept, Akari drives it home, telling you how vital crafting is and leading you to the Craftworks so she can tell you again. The tutorials are far from over, but the game lets go of your hand by activating Jubilife Village's default state. The village will continue to expand over time, but as long as its inhabitants act like people, I have no complaints. The first townsperson you meet is Anthe, who offers you a free outfit change courtesy of the professor. This is a clever case of Laventon and Cyllene subtly clashing. Cyllene wants you to wear what is essentially an army uniform, as though you were a grunt, whereas Laventon wants you to wear something comfortable. The two never fight, but PLA is better off for the tonal variety they provide. Akari meets you at the Craftworks to drag on her crafting lecture. I guess I can't fault her for being long-winded, given the medium I'm using to do so. In short, PLA would be nothing without crafting. This tutorial removes crafting from its context, which proves its fundamental success even as a standalone feature. Don't fret, there will be a tutorial in context soon. It doesn't push the boundaries. You interact with a workbench and press a button that combines your materials into an item, but it's made as intuitive as possible. You need the recipe for an item to craft it, which can be sold for different prices, tied to progression, or reserved for completionists. Items are given descriptions, materials display their required amounts, and you get to choose how much of an item you want to craft, all the way up to 999. The process is snappy and thoroughly effective. And apparently we didn't have a Pokédex until now, so we get that too. Seems like that should have come earlier, but okay. Before we can make for the Fieldlands, Beauregard draws our attention to his iconic Wurmple request. Speaking to NPCs with request symbols above their heads will initiate a request, reviewable at any time from your map. Beauregard's request is a soft evolution tutorial, having you fetch him a Wurmple that will informatively evolve into a Beautifly later. I also grabbed this curiously positioned request for a Shinx, which we're guaranteed to already have. I guess this is the soft tutorial for completing requests? It's such eccentric writing for such a frivolous prompt that it's kinda charming. It makes a bit more sense alongside this one for a Starly, which has you complete its Pokédex entry. You do have a Starly, but you haven't completed its entry yet, so it's a marked step up. Back in the Fieldlands, we get a brief rundown of research tasks. Laventon's description is perfectly succinct. The Pokédex has a collection of tasks for each species of Pokémon, and you should do them. The survey tip compactly conveys this information, also explaining that pressing down while focused on a Pokémon brings up their task page directly. It's the ideal microtutorial for an intuitive system. Then Akari turns to you and the pacing promptly enters cardiac arrest. She's trying to demonstrate how to dodge, but she never explains how to, while the UI does. It reads like the game is flaunting Akari's dodge animation, which comes off as desperate. Maybe the reason your rival is the opposite gender's avatar is to reuse their animations. Actually, that's almost certainly it. Good job impressing your players, game. Akari then walks about 10 steps away so she can tutorialize you again. This is a reprise of The Trial, a sequence that was already drawn out the first time, but specifically for catching-based research tasks. You catch Bidoof again. Then you catch Starly without being spotted, which you did the first time. Then Akari runs off to the forest and waits for you to catch up. Is she trying to teach you to explore by making you follow her to a specific point? You can encounter a tumblestone deposit along the way, which behaves exactly like a berry tree. Throw a Pokemon at it to harvest its materials. I'm thankful the game doesn't cutscene you through this, at least. Akari then forces you to fight a Buizel for a research task. So this is still a trial reprise, just a little to the left. Bizarrely, you can't check research tasks in a Pokemon battle, which isn't a huge deal, but it causes lots of needless guesswork and wasted time. It seems like the reason Akari breadcrumbed you through the Horseshoe Plains is to reward you with the crafting kit and potion recipe afterwards. I don't need to explain how flimsy that is, right? It feels like the crafting kit was a late addition sometimes, and this is no exception. That said, it's an absolutely crucial consideration that dramatically bolsters the game flow, so I have no right to complain, especially since we get a reprieve from the tutorials to accrue research tasks. My initial dogged response was to trot back to Laventon and continue the tutorial, before it dawned on me that I could finally explore. I'm being Pavlovianly conditioned to obey in an exploration game. That's messed up. There are plenty more tutorials after this, so let's make the most of it. Due to a patrolling Survey Corps member, we're contained to the northernmost 3 sublocations of the Fieldlands: Florero Gardens, Aspiration Hill, and Horseshoe Plains. Aspiration Hill is the starting area, which we know all too well by now, and Florero Gardens is a small reclusive area west of it. The Horseshoe Plains are the spotlight, a sprawling meadow rife with Pokemon to catch and landmarks to admire. Despite the grand premise, PLA's core gameplay loop could admittedly be described as busy work. Research tasks are just that, a set of tasks and a glorified instruction manual to systematically knock out until completion. Don't mistake that cold description for disdain though. I wouldn't be deconstructing this game if I didn't find its core gameplay loop profoundly worthy of discussion. The deciding factor in PLA is how enlightening the world is to interact with. The Pokemon IP is absolutely priceless in that regard. The amount of depth and emotional potency you can add to a world by throwing Pikachu at it is astounding. Throughout its various iterations, the magic of Pokemon has always been in its world. A world with hundreds of fascinating monsters, varied enough that you'll always find one you connect with, to befriend and adventure alongside. It's a perfect escapist setup, letting the player whisk away the troubles of day-to-day life and spend some time as a plucky adventurer in a picturesque fantasy world. Even when the Pokemon were pixels on a piss-colored calculator, players' creativities were sparked so bright that they could complete the fantasy in their heads. To this day, I believe that the goal of the Pokemon franchise should be to capture that fantasy as earnestly as possible. In that sense, the choice to set PLA in the past, before that world was established, is a treacherous one, potentially negating that fantasy altogether. However, the moment I set foot in the Horseshoe Plains, that fantasy came rushing back. I got a jolt of excitement with every new Pokemon I caught, and I smiled wider with every unique item or landmass I came across. There were no more interruptions. Items simply entered my inventory. Biomes became biomes with no seams or strings attached. Even the Pokédex supplemented the fantasy, like taking field notes on a wildlife expedition. It's when that familiar feeling set in, that sensation of, I think I'm gonna love this game. No game can be defined by one moment, so I won't make any sweeping judgments until I soliloquize about PLA's every crevice for the next 6 hours, but in its first moment of freedom, PLA feels truly magical. There's something electric about the act of crafting a Pokeball. For such a cornerstone of the franchise to be forged by your own hand is endlessly engaging on a personal level. In practical terms, you're throwing balls at trees and navigating menus, but the act of gathering materials for your Pokeballs constantly feels just a little rewarding. It's not challenging, which is for the best. Pokeballs are a necessity in a Pokemon game, so collecting them should be trivial. If a player can't collect Pokeballs, they can't do anything. Pokemon can jump out of shaking berry trees and ore deposits, but this is clearly signposted and the battles are optional. I wouldn't call ambush encounters fully baked, but the scenario variety they provide keeps their inclusion above water. Item collection effectively balances out PLA's larger hurdles with some feel-good neuron activation. Despite its handy UI benefits, the focus feature is kind of incompetent. It frequently directs your attention to Pokemon that aren't even on screen and fails to differentiate between docile and hostile Pokemon. If I'm readying a Pokeball, I don't want to target an uncatchable Pokemon and ditto with a Pokemon I can't even see. You can change focus with the A button, but mapping this to A makes it hard to manage at speed. You can also move your camera with the Switch controller's IR pointer if you're insane. I am profusely grateful that it's not mandatory so I don't have to dock points for it. The option is nice, but why does your reticle follow your controller when you're focused on a Pokemon? Isn't it supposed to be a lock-on? I may have given this feature the time of day otherwise, but it just makes targeting less consistent, so I disabled it. More power to you if it improves your play experience. I'm glad it's an option, even with its shortcomings, in case it benefits someone. Some bizarre quirk caused me to lose this Eevee, a surprisingly rare encounter that I intend to add to my party. It felt like something was malfunctioning, but this Eevee is infamous for evading capture from all angles, so it was probably a skill issue. I've heard so many stories about this Eevee, tragic and comedic, and creating stories is a key component of the Pokemon formula. This was a frustrating moment, but I do appreciate having such an elusive Pokemon available so early when every other Pokemon is such a pushover. Well, almost every other Pokemon. This Rapidash creates stories by spiking the tension to 11. It's fully evolved, it has its own arena, it's massive, its eyes are glowing red, and worst of all, it's level 40. You will get destroyed by this thing. Sure, it's possible that some schmo threw one Pokeball at the thing and won the lottery, but defying the odds is a story in its own right, and that being possible is what makes it so tempting to pursue. On my first playthrough, I tried to battle it, got my ass beat, and surrendered with a graveyard satchel and battle scars. Every player who encounters it returns home with a story to tell, and a newfound respect for Cylene's proclamation that you will die in the wild. This next point is taken basically verbatim from Arlo's excellent A Big Fat Review of Breath of the Wild, which you should absolutely check out. Hold your horses with the Breath of the Wild ripoff comments, by the way, I'll get to it. This encounter is memorable because the game doesn't take pity on you. Nothing's making this fight literally impossible, you are simply not strong enough to do it. That initial dejection makes your eventual success absolutely glorious. You can take pride in how far you've come as a trainer, and you get a jacked up Rapidash. I like that it's missable too. If the game funneled you into this fight and knocked you unconscious, it would be cheap and unfair. This setup puts the brunt on the player rather than the script. You were warned that there would be powerful creatures out here, and this thing's eyes are literally glowing red. Even on second playthrough, I very nearly got a heart attack when it ran directly at me. Oh, and then it did this. I think this is a bug. It's less imposing when it sometimes decides to run in circles forever, and judging by Twitter in January 2022, it seems to happen a lot. Suffice it to say though, I adore this moment. It adds a unique wrinkle to the Pokemon fantasy. The world isn't really your oyster in this game, you're just living in it. I escaped the Rapidash's den, day turned to night, and Drifloon started spawning. It's a surprisingly dark conclusion when you think about it, given how Drifloon supposedly lures away young children and carries them off to the afterlife. I accidentally angered 2 of them at once, leading me into my first multi-battle. You can cycle through targets with ZL, but you're taking more hits than you're dishing out no matter what, making for an appropriate and well-contextualized punishment for reckless play. This is when I first sent out Cyndaquil, and its spikes immediately won me over. Without them, it's essentially just a sickly mouse, but with them, it's a kingpin of monster design. The vibrant fire spines give it a distinguishable silhouette, a creative and non-intrusive gimmick, some depth in universe, and even something of an implied personality. Their purposefully jagged rendering and animation are atypical enough to be novel, even within the loose reality of Pokemon, while staying true to Cyndaquil's retro sensibilities. PLA deserves major props for somehow making fire cute. It's not a fluke either. Pokemon across the board are rigorously posed and animated to display their specialties and personalities, and the end result is a truly diverse and fleshed out roster that cuts no corners and leaves nobody behind. I skipped out on Floral Gardens on this first skim through the Fieldlands. Freedom can be spellbinding, and it's tempting to shun the tedious tutorials awaiting us back home when given the chance, but doing so puts you at risk of overleveling and trivializing the entire game. If anything, PLA encourages this. If you can tap dance around an Alpha Snorlax at the Eastern Bottleneck, you find a second massive plateau to get lost in. That's a magical discovery at the expense of hours of tedium later. I was lucky that I needed to re-enter the area to respawn Eevee, but regardless, I want to set the precedent now that I'm not thoroughly investigating every sublocation. PLA's world is massive, and methodically scraping it isn't how the game is actually played anyway. You might reasonably assume that I'm covering absolutely everything in PLA, but a perfectly thorough analysis is a Sisyphean task. This disclaimer will probably make the 10-minute rants about a UI quirk or an item placement sound even more asinine, but I want to temper expectations right now. I'm not going to have much to say about Worn Bridge. I'm sorry. I report back to Laventon, who helpfully explains my corporate role as a piece rate employee for the Survey Corps. You get paid for every Pokemon you catch, with the amount depending on their levels and your star rank. You also receive bonuses for fulfilling certain conditions, such as catching new species or performing backstrikes, which are clearly displayed to the player. One curious design choice is the bonus for catching 10, 20, and 30 Pokemon. Laventon tells you how many Pokemon you've caught before you cache them, so this is always in your control. As arbitrary as it sounds, it regulates the pacing and occasionally kept me exploring a little longer. 10 Pokemon is a good minimum for a satisfying excursion, and encouraging any more than 30 would get tiresome quickly, so I'll reluctantly accept the decimal centrism. Laventon then helpfully explains Pokedex research levels. Akari waffled about this for a whole reprise without demonstrating why you should care, so Laventon gives us the rundown. Once you do enough research tasks to reach research level 10, the entry is complete and you get a points bonus. Oh, and research points are rewarded based on research level. Good luck getting all those research buzzwords straight. PLA is not great with nomenclature. The system itself is intuitive and provides PLA a good excuse to fence off higher difficulty areas. Seeing the numbers tick up and the Pokedex expand is inherently satisfying. The slick UI design distinguishes the systems visually and emphasizes the player's accomplishments. That clarity comes at the expense of time though, which I find to be an unfair trade. Imagine if the Pokemon caught menu, the earnings tally, the Pokedex update menu, and the research point tally were all woven into one scrolling screen. I understand the positives of separating them, but at a certain point I'm not looking for visual flair, I'm looking to get back to Jubilife. You'll be seeing these menus constantly, so any and all optimization here is welcome. Once he's tallied everything up, Laventon asks what you want to do next. Return to Jubilife is the second option. If you thought I was above criticizing the order of options on a dialogue tree, you were so wrong. There are 2 ways to interpret this dialogue placement, neither of which look particularly good for PLA. The first is that the game thinks continue my expedition is the more common choice. That could only be true if players periodically reported back to Laventon, which they could rationally do every 30 encounters to maximize profit. The biggest issue with this logic is that nobody fucking does this. My apologies if you do, by the way, you might want to close your ears for this one. PLA isn't meant to be played methodically and mechanically, counting captures to maximize profits, and its explorative premise doesn't facilitate it anyway. PLA is at its best when you get lost in Hisui's vast expanse, not when you scrutinize every minor detail. And besides, 30 is the highest bonus for a reason. Most of my excursions capped at 10 or 20, and that's excluding dozens of already cumbersome micro-excursions for area reloads. The second interpretation of this dialogue placement is that they didn't think about it too much. I wish they had, with how hard I'm thinking about it now. I stand by it though. Over the course of a playthrough, not being able to mash A through this becomes a major headache. Here's the fun part though, mashing B doesn't work either. That selects a third option, gotta go, that's literally just the first option again. Both A and B are mapped to cancel, while proceed has to be navigated to. It's total madness. You can open your ears now, let's move on. The cutscene of Cylene giving you your first star is awesome. The music is euphoric and up-tempo, the UI is slick and satisfying, and both you and Cylene are clearly miserable to be here. The pause before unceremoniously declaring, "You can now use heavy balls," is comedy gold. Thankfully, the game holds out on an exclamation point until the third text box. This would have gotten a little too exciting. Cylene hands you the recipes for heavy balls and revives, again with a glare of unbridled hatred. You stare each other down as the contents are explained to the player, and she muses that maybe foreigners are good if she can profit off of them. This scene nails the militaristic demeanor of Cylene in a way that is so serious that it is deeply unserious, and I'm absolutely here for it. That scene is contrasted with a more kindly scene at the Wallflower. It takes place at sunset, even if you initiate it in the middle of the night, so I assume I spent another day failing the Eevee while the cameras weren't rolling. Akari, who can't help but make a tutorial out of everything, points the player towards the Beauregard request that Beauregard himself confronted you about 2 days ago, while Laventon gives him helpful advice about picking up requests from the blackboard in his office. I understand the impulse to inject the tutorials with as much personality as possible, since you'll be spending most of this adventure alone, but Akari's only personality trait is that she gives long-winded, unhelpful tutorials. Well, that and that she's obsessed with you. Her dopey, subservient nature should set off alarm bells, especially compared to her male counterpart Ray, who's already a multifaceted character at this point. The fact that Laventon gives consistently better tutorials, despite his characterization being more nuanced in other areas, doesn't help PLA's case either. I'm not calling PLA's writing misogynistic. Both rivals quickly fall into your shadow, and it's fairly conventional that Ray would be more hot-headed about it. But either way, Akari's lack of identity harms both the tutorials and the characters giving them. What stings is that the Wallflower was the perfect setup for a genuine character piece that PLA seems incapable of creating. I want to like Akari, but the game doesn't give you anything to forge a connection over. It's easy to write off PLA's tutorials as boring time wasters. But even if you need the tutorials, they are made intentionally unhelpful and drawn out for seemingly mean-spirited reasons. I reiterate, a book of survey tips on your desk would have been sufficient. The next day, we're reminded of the root of Akari's perceived inferiority. She was knocked out by a horde of Shinx, and her Pikachu lost faith in her. Not really helping her case, but I don't hate it. It's been mentioned before, and it interplays well with the Shinx at Aspiration Hill. Regardless, we level the playing field by knocking out her Pikachu ourselves. Pokemon loves making mountains out of anthills when it comes to the emotional impact of battles, even when they feature no coherent strategy. This battle was just me hurling my mouse at her slightly weaker mouse, but she talks like she's about to make a religion out of it. It comes off like PLA doesn't know what it's like to play PLA. Next, you're given permanent on-command access to the type chart. PLA is usually opaque about its inner workings, since advertising that your lovable companions are bits and bytes kinda ruins the fantasy. Naturally, this prompts players to look it up and ruin it for themselves. PLA therefore wants to disincentivize its players from looking things up, while also not revealing the information the internet has readily available, somehow. I think the challenge is constructive. Competition is good for the consumer, and it forces PLA to play nice if it wants control over its experience. As such, it recognizes that nobody wants to scrapbook all 324 type interactions and waves the white flag. That may have been the intended experience 20 years ago, but PLA takes the type chart as a given, and is therefore better off leveling the playing field now. We're introduced to Zissou, Hisui's designated battle expert, who gestures vaguely at the action order system. The corresponding survey tip, strangely, isn't shown for another hour. Turns are distributed based on action speed, a combination of the delta of your and your opponent's speed stat and the action speed of your last moves. Did you get that? No? Don't worry about it. Just press Y in battle to check the upcoming turn order, choose the most powerful move that gives you the most turns, and ignore everything else. Moves can be mastered through level up, allowing Pokemon to use them in strong or agile style. Strong style decreases action speed while increasing damage and accuracy, while agile style decreases damage while increasing action speed and accuracy. It's pretty clear who the real winner is there. For how central it is to PLA, action order barely tilts the dial. It suits the game's savage tone, concentrates the battle system, provides the necessary framework for multi-battles, and introduces another avenue for progression and move mastery, but it lacks the strategic depth to make the splash it shoots for. As an NPC, Zissou is a one-stop shop for all of your battle-related needs, which is to say she does 3 things: teach moves, master moves, and exchange battle items. I guess it's not her fault that she specializes in a bare-bones system. Each Pokemon has a selection of tutorable moves, mostly type coverage and utility options, to fluff up their move pools. The hand-picked prices are a slick balancing factor, forcing players to weigh their options and pre-plan future battles, and letting you purchase level-up moves early plays right into PLA's take on difficulty. I was able to expend Rest, but not Swift or Aerial Ace, and I felt empowered for doing so. Moves can also be mastered early, but that costs a seed of mastery I don't have, and the item exchange won't make any sense yet. Her only other functionality is patronizing you if you ask her what a battle is. On your way back to the Fieldlands, Volo steps in to be useless at you. His characterization is thankfully much less overpowering, but he is teaching you what a backstrike is, so he clearly thinks you're an idiot. It makes a cool sound. You remembered that, right? Initiating a battle with a backstrike nets you a free turn, which is necessary to know and hard to discover, yet Volo barely mentions it. For what it's worth, the ensuing unawares state is brilliant. It provides parity between catching and battling, promotes stealth even in offensive contexts, and saves so much time over a playthrough. Eevee being so rare so early is a stroke of genius. It made hunting it down uniquely intense and rewarding knowing the temporal cost of failure. Mechanically, all I did was distract it with a berry, sneak up behind it, and throw a Pokeball. I call this the bait and catch method, and it never fails. I know it's oversimplified and overcentralizing, but it's so endlessly satisfying that I don't mind. I got so absorbed in the tension that I forgot I was catching this thing to facilitate mechanical analysis for a YouTube video. Pokemon can break out of Pokeballs, which PLA needs to demonstrate visibly yet non-intrusively so as to not interrupt gameplay. It opts for 3 vertical bounces followed by a firework to signify success, which basically solves everything instantly. The strict verticality makes it visible in tall grass or from a distance without wasting screen real estate, and it feels appropriately DIY for a makeshift Pokeball. Weirdly enough, Pokemon can't escape during the bounces. They're more symbolic than anything. 1 bounce catches are basically guaranteed, 3 bounce catches are unlikely, 2 bounce catches are theorized by fringe cryptozoologists but remain unconfirmed, and if it doesn't bounce at all, you're fucked. There's also a helpful sound effect and HUD overlay with some basic information about the Pokemon. This system fits PLA extremely well and is packed with clever design. But seriously, 2 bounce catches should be the most common outcome, right? What's up with that? You can nickname your Pokemon via the drop-down menu. Nicknames are an understated but crucial component in letting players get attached to their Pokemon, given how they naturally translate player-made stories into the game's world, and besides Beauregard letting you choose his Wurmple's nickname, it's possible to miss it outright. I'm glad it's optional, but more frequent reminders would be apt for such an at-home feature. I know Cyndaquil is neither Tapir nor Capybara, but I named him Tapibara. It's a cute name, sue me. This one is too. Eevee famously has 8 branching evolutions, with so many convoluted requirements that they topple into each other. Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon evolve via items, Espeon and Umbreon evolve through friendship, Leafeon and Glaceon used to evolve via locations and now also evolve via items. Sylveon used to evolve through affection, which doesn't exist anymore. PLA's solution is to have friendship evolutions yield Sylveon when the Eevee knows a fairy-type move, which it will without manual interference, and otherwise yield Espeon or Umbreon depending on time of day. This makes Espeon and Umbreon deceptively difficult to obtain, requiring a conscious delay of evolution until level 25 to learn a 5th move and overwrite Baby Doll Eyes. It's especially damning when prospective evolutions are untelegraphed and irreversible, forcing you to reset the game and lose your progress if you get it wrong. Sylveon's unintuitive evolution shouldn't take Espeon's and Umbreon's down with it. The concept of Pokemon evolving through bonding with trainers brilliantly canonizes the symbiotic relationship between people and Pokemon, and PLA pounces by encouraging such heartfelt exercises as throwing them at trees and rocks. This is, according to PLA, the best way to befriend my Eevee. Despite PLA massively improving when you cherish your Pokemon, friendship is as diminutive as possible. They get some for gaining experience, they lose some for fainting, and a couple Pokemon evolve from it. You can let your Pokemon out of their ball and interact with them anywhere, which is a fantastic feature that should be incentivized, but it doesn't interact with friendship at all. It's an unfinished mechanic that could have been a cornerstone. After the Security Corps guard's scheduled disintegration, we meet and battle the Warden Mai. Her Munchlax rocked my shit with strong style rollout, and while the challenge is appreciated, quick attack into swap out into repeat made quick work of it before I had to resort to thinking. Most Pokemon have Quick Attack by now, integrating action order moves early, and therefore overpowering any other strategy. Most of my team keeps Quick Attack forever. It's basically a free fake out on every turn in certain fights. Mai handles her time on expedition duty with grace. Her explanation of alpha Pokemon works particularly well for alpha survivors by keeping the obvious stuff brief. They're bigger, they're stronger, and they have red eyes, while providing the insight that they can know tutor moves naturally, which isn't really knowable yet without hardcore sleuthing. She also gives you directions to the Heartwood before your phone interrupts to godsplain it to you. She even takes that in stride as a learning opportunity for Hisui's religious beliefs. Notably, these focalize an almighty being who is distinctly not Arceus, so maybe God chose the wrong time to chime in. Part of me wants to tell her that her religion is wrong, but we all know how that goes. Deer Track Path resembles a mini gauntlet with its abundant and aggressive Geodude, but it's functionally a funnel to the mandatory upcoming showdown. I promise PLA becomes an exploration game eventually. This sequence has value though. It forces players to choose how they address hostile Pokemon, laying the groundwork for nuanced playstyles to build up from. Kricketune kills it as the introductory alpha Pokemon, with its iconic cry and early accessibility making it equal parts imposing and fiddle beetle. It's accessible so early that I brought my own for comparison. Not quite David and Goliath, but it's noticeable. I even taught mine Aerial Ace, which should have been my first clue that it would know Aerial Ace. Starly picks up the slack to hopefully save us from tutorial hell, and we witness our first new Pokemon, Weirdeer. It looks fittingly enlightened for a Psychic-type figure of worship, and bears fitting resemblance to its infamously Normal-type pre-evolution Stantler. Could use some Botox, but it can strut like a motherfucker. We desecrate Weirdeer's sacred altar with a handy warp point, and Akari suggests winding down at the Wallflower. This leaves us with some unfinished business, but the winding down of PLA's early linearity is cause for celebration, and I suppose I wouldn't mind a quick rest. Alright, let's talk about it. PLA crashes, kind of a lot. It crashes during loading screens, overworld events, and sometimes for no discernible reason. Some people's experiences have been ruined by the constant crashing. Others have lost hours of progress or shiny Pokemon. This is why you need autosave on to play PLA. Even with it, I had to retread 5 minutes of middling cutscenes. I'm about to spend hours upon hours philosophizing about this game. This was my only crash, and I'm glad I got the chance to fall in love with it, but not everyone is so lucky. If PLA crashes on you constantly, no amount of savvy game design can fix that. No game should crash this frequently and irrationally. It's bad and it's wrong, and that's all it is. The scene at the Wallflower is nice. The tutorializing feels less superficial when your actions directly impact the community, which is currently being mauled by Kleavor? Wow, choice words. Look, the plot's starting. The Diamond Clan, led by Adaman, thinks Almighty Sinnoh controls time. The Pearl Clan, led by Irida, thinks Almighty Sinnoh controls space.
Oh, and here's a hot tip if you're a writer. You can't pretend you're going to kill off your main character because we know she's not going to die because she can't die because this is a prequel to a famous Disney Renaissance film!
Alright, plot's over. Even ignoring that it crumbles on first glance at Pokemon Diamond and Pearl's box art, somehow it shatters on arrival due to Arceus. It occasionally acknowledges that it's a farce, but never meaningfully confronts it, instead banking on its humor, I guess? Adaman and Irida are functionally joke characters, spouting playground insults and dimensional riffs about an unfathomably high-concept religious conflict, but time puns and attempted space puns can't carry a story. Their character designs are excellent. Both embody their unique personalities and boldly distinguish them from the crowd, even if their literal resemblance to Dalga and Palkia are a little gratuitous. The real comedy is in the tonal whiplash. It's confirmed in their second scene that Hisui has gone to war over this. PLA makes no attempt to provide meaningful commentary on religiocentrism, which would be understandable if it wasn't presenting a religiocentrism plot, you know? Anyway, default white boy bursts in to distract them. Adaman greets me hospitably, Irida doubts my existence, and Komodo tells me to quell that thing that mauled his core last night. This is a classic case of PLA almost acknowledging that you have no business being the main character before realizing that you are. Clearly nobody wants me in charge of saving this region. I just got here and I'm 15. But the game does, so they finagle their future into my hands anyway. The game then almost acknowledges the implications of Pokeballs. That's 3 false starts in a row for anyone counting. Despite carrying the entire Pokemon franchise on their backs, Pokeballs are almost objectively reprehensible devices of forced entrapment, and PLA walks a toothpick tightrope trying to defuse this. PLA's NPCs don't use Pokeballs, giving PLA the floor to comprehensively analyze their pros and cons, but doing so would vilify the entire franchise, so it handwaves everything and arguably justifies enslavement. Honestly, the game shoots itself in the foot even mentioning it. Like with much of the Pokemon world, the ethics mold to the game design. It's been a few minutes since I was told that I'm going to die, so I check in with Silene. She tells me to appease the frenzied Pokemon by concocting an offering made in conjunction with its warden, and also that I'm going to die. I say we throw bombs at it. Baggin, who expands your satchel storage for ballooning yet begrudgingly sufferable prices, catches the tail of the tutorial trail with an unsolicited yet begrudgingly helpful advertisement. Laventon's Blackboard is also open for townsfolk to advertise requests on, so I take on Bothersome Bidoof as a token of gratitude. These two and Silene make up the Galaxy Hall circuit, and while its application undersells its true size, the proximity is nice. Together with the catching-based What Do Shinx's Ears Look Like and the Dex completion-based Adorable Starly, the scripted sequence-based Bothersome Bidoof completes a starter request trifecta. It also technically makes this another trial reprise, but let me have this. You're tasked with finding 3 Bidoof munching on wood around the city, concluding with Sanqua recruiting them to the construction corps, which the game actually sticks to. It's a charming status quo shift for Jubilife and a welcome change of pace, proving that PLA can do character-driven cutscenes right. Fetch quests are, by all accounts, harmless. PLA prides itself on being interactable, and fetch quests non-intrusively provoke interaction with lower priority items. They're cheesy distractions for attentive players, gentle encouragement of deeper investigation for less engaged players, and even at their worst, the wrinkles they weave into PLA's world don't go unnoticed. Volo ambushes you with another round of frivolous dialogue, but I like this scene. I wouldn't call his gradual shift in hospitality subtle, but it's decently believable and serves to both benefit the player and keep Volo in the picture. Super potions restore 100 HP now too. Nice! While I explore the vague trail to the Heartwood, I want to discuss the differences between real-time and turn-based combat and their effect on the gameplay loop. Damage in the overworld is a temporary penalty, whereas HP in turn-based battles is an expendable resource. Even expert Pokemon players don't win without taking damage, the mastery is in allotting your HP for maximum gain. In contrast, perfect play in real-time combat expends nothing, swinging the scales in its favor. Recognizing this, the game positions turn-based catching as a last resort, claiming that once Pokemon are aggravated, they must be caught in battle. In practice though, you're almost always better off running 10 feet away, having them forget that you exist, and trying again. The only punishment for alerting a Pokemon is your time and a strut around the corner, and while that's sometimes enough, it's flimsy ground to stake turn-based catches on. Pokemon are also easier to catch with low HP or status conditions, neither of which apply in the overworld, but this lacks the fundamental consistency factor. Where overworld battling is deterministic and infinitely repeatable, turn-based battles are unpredictable and life or death. Critical hits and damage rolls make reaching low HP a coin toss, and since most status conditions inflict passive damage, your luck is on a time limit. Better yet, wild Pokemon can damage themselves, heal themselves, or end a battle at random with no counterplay. You could research every Pokemon's moveset and bring immunities for their recoil moves if you're insane, but even that only covers like 2 moves, so let's round down to 0. Turn-based combat falls apart outside of its primary context. The fact that False Swipe, a move that can't kill the target, is both indispensable for catching and worthless for battling emphasizes the two systems' fundamental incompatibility. I'm glad I'm the armchair analyst here. Designing around this sounds rough. PLA is smart to de-emphasize turn-based catching, and its move pool system at least smooths out the fault line, but running from everything should never be the dominant strategy. Incidentally, turn-based combat sticks together within its primary context, as demonstrated by an Alpha Parasect lurking beneath Deer Track Heights. Where the Alpha Rapidash taught fear, this one teaches bravery. It piques your interest with rare items and a unique Paris Den set piece, lets you venture into it at your own pace, and culminates in a tricky yet surmountable alpha fight. It's brilliant storytelling and progression through level design, not to mention how you can skip the theatrics and Sephiroth the Parasect directly. The in-universe moral implications of ransacking an animal den are questionable, but Pokemon respawn, so let's not talk about it. Another fun alpha encounter is the Bibarel at Tidewater Dam, since it's at a geographical bottleneck, forcing the player's interest and respect. This is where turn-based combat shines, and real-time combat supplements it via the unawares state. Frankly, letting you kill Pokemon yourself would have been troubling even for Hisui. Alpha defeats are so lucrative that you'll only want 1 or 2 per area, keeping them niche, but they're at least worthwhile. My satchel populated with Hisui's naturally occurring plants and fungi as quickly as it siphoned them out. They're thoughtful, but not more useful than the crucial storage space they occupy, rendering them mostly irrelevant. With so many items vying for their place and no option to temporarily drop them, niche crafting materials get permanently discarded quick. Eevee evolved into Sylveon on the Heartwood outskirts, becoming my first fully evolved core team member. Your Pokemon need to grow alongside you to parallel your adventure, and new moves won't cut it when they're still courtesy of a stupid beaver. They can't take away your stupid beaver though, so they make it a stronger stupid beaver. The abstraction of real-life gradual evolution to 3 stages is archaic as it is genius. It lets drastic changes happen without awkward transitional designs, and gives the player time to grow attached to every stage. Even 3-stage evolutions occasionally face the teenager problem, although Quilava is a proud exception. It embodies teenage flair without being overpoweringly humanoid, and its sleek shape distinguishes it within its evolutionary family. Overly drastic changes can be equally problematic though, so there's an inevitable give and take. You'd hate to see a Pokemon you love and cherish become a stupid, abominable, egg-fisted, nightmare-fuel shit-for-brains fail crab. That's far from a common occurrence though. Evolution is irreplaceable and nearly immutable for its promotion of lovable and variable Pokemon designs, and even when PLA explores divergent or regressive evolution, that 3-tier structure is always the anchor. And I'm not discussing every Pokemon, I would go insane. You have to follow a river valley to reach the Grand Tree, Kleavor's domain. As linear as this is, it's a lovely and naturalistic landmark with unfamiliar Pokemon and items to keep you entertained. It's a masterclass in agreeable linearity. There's also a Scyther Den conveniently placed beside the Grand Tree, adding context to Kleavor's residence and gating the powerful Scyther behind exploration. The contextless pathway to it is notably unnaturalistic though. Spoiler alert, the climax of the Fieldlands is a real-time boss fight against Kleavor. The brute forcing PLA does to justify this plot-wise is fascinating. Kleavor's warden Leon proves our strength with a 6v1 battle against his blob, whines that he can no longer feed Kleavor his favorite food without getting mauled, Irida forebodes a clan war, and God opens a window. A mysterious power now enables you to return to base camps in an instant. This is what I mean about the storytelling. It's good for pacing, but man, it's hard to take PLA seriously sometimes. As if to prove my point, Laventon looks at walls for 20 seconds before scientifically declaring that we should throw bombs at it. That's what I said. This solution isn't total nonsense, but it's close. If you're like me, you've already learned firsthand that Pokemon don't enjoy having round foodstuffs hurled at their face. The Jubilife pit stop lets me stock up on storage space from Bagan. Get used to this, we're gonna be here a lot. Back in the Fieldlands, Weirdeer goes from Tutelary to Taxicab as our first ride Pokemon. This is PLA's primary traversal method given its breakneck speed and ability to jump, making its early introduction a godsend. It's easy, it's efficient, it can weasel up walls sometimes, it feels good, and it altogether makes for that's not how you play a flute, what the fuck? That's a tube! God, this game is so fucking trash. Together with the bizarre camera angles, complete silence, and magically materializing mind plate, the scene isn't PLA's best foot forward. The Celestica flute, colloquially known as the plus button, lets you summon a mount at any time by paying tribute to the Azure flute, so I do that. Yes, I did this in my first playthrough, don't act like you didn't. Thankfully, I get a chance at redemption with the introduction of the balloon race minigame in which you race to pop balloons. It's not even very good, and yet whenever I catch a glimpse of this Breath of the Wild-ass character, some animalistic corner of my brain snorts a line of serotonin. Running with Y, jumping with B, controlling Weirder with the left stick and the camera with the right results in some nightmarish claw grip maneuvering and unfair losses. But who cares? This guy's name is Balloon Race. It does well to stimulate different areas of the brain than standard gameplay and take your mind off of the constant death for a while. And I like that your prize is 15 feather balls, rewarding diligent players with the next Pokeball upgrade early. Another benefit of the Heartwoods River Run level design reveals itself on revisit. With Weirder's robust jump, I can bypass the whole thing, silently demonstrating Weirder's utility and opening up the world. Bibarel also commands significantly less respect now, and you're incentivized to spread out into Windswept Run or above the Heights camp. The stretch from Deer Track Heights to the Heartwood masterfully exemplifies the Fieldland's transformation from stringent linearity to invisible guide rails to exhilarating, unfettered openness. PLA has a field day getting Leon on your side about bombing his deity. This time it's Irida proving your worth in a 6v1 fight against her Glaceon. It's a step up difficulty-wise and thematically from Gumi at least, but PLA is so lacking in trainer battles that pushovers like this dent the overall experience. Cleavor's introductory cutscene is a visual spectacle by PLA's standards. Its rapid movements are sold well by the screen shake and sound effects, and the lighting is noticeably meticulous. I wish pre-rendering was utilized more frequently because it works wonders here. Cleavor is defeated by throwing bombs while dodging its decreasingly telegraphed attacks. Pretty standard fare for real-time video game boss fights, with occasional swerves into turn-based combat, after which you can freely accumulate, damage? Resolve? You can imagine how weird this reads contextually. It's made by its intuitiveness mechanically, which itself is made by leaning on common video game shorthand. It's not characteristically Pokemon-like, which may deter longtime fans, but it's universally understandable and at least tangentially attached to PLA's overworld gameplay. PLA didn't fall from a space-time rift. It's still an entry in the tradition-loving Pokemon franchise. It's tempting to compare PLA with its predecessors, among which it reflects favorably, but I learned through making this essay how short that sells it. PLA isn't great because it's better than other games. All of PLA's supposed innovations are borrowed anyway. PLA is great because it holds its own. Cleavor knows Stealth Rock, a move PLA massively rehauled. Typically a contender for the best move in the game, Stealth Rock sets a hazard that deals 12.5% of any Pokemon's HP upon switch-in, and up to 50% on types weak to Rock, rendering every 4x Rock weakness competitively useless. In PLA, hazards don't exist, and Stealth Rock is a decent move that inflicts residual damage. 4x Rock weaknesses also don't exist. We'll get to that. But PLA isn't great because Stealth Rock doesn't murder Charizard anymore. Charizard isn't even in this game, and that's not what makes it great either. It's the experience it crafts, balanced Stealth Rock and all, that's worth celebrating. After another genuinely stunning cutscene, Cleavor overcomes its frenzy and telepathically transfers the insect plate. There's some tepid dialogue about whether quelling Cleavor was right, which doesn't turn the dial for me, and the plot humbly concludes with some citrus berries. I take on a few requests on my way out. It's a really lovely moment. There's no sense of urgency, no animosity or unrest, just some light-hearted world building and the warm glow of a rainy sunset. The Fieldlands might have dragged me through the mud, but I'm leaving with a smile on my face. Upon re-entering Jubilife, Volo launches into a spiel that reveals both his manipulative fairweather friend nature and his obsession with boring shit like the fabled plates of old that keep materializing into my hands. They're connected to Arceus, dude, we know. So is my cell phone. After ranking up, receiving the Featherball recipe, and debriefing with Komodo, we return to the Wallflower for more casual player worshipping. Even Benny gets in on it, giving Akari the always useful smoke bomb recipe to relay to you. Because PLA can't let me live my life for 3 seconds, a Hex Maniac approaches me with a frivolous collectibles quest before I can even get home. Really though, what would an exploration game be without frivolous collectibles? This cutscene sends 108 wisps across Hisui, which assemble Spiritomb when gathered. This could have been initiated earlier, but there were enough tutorials anyway, and the Fieldlands only truly opened up a few plot beats ago, so what better time to promote exploration? Because PLA can't even let me live my life for 2 seconds, Arizu approaches me before I can even get to work. She's starring in the upcoming Crimson Mirelands plot, which currently boils down to, Ursaluna is in a frenzy. Go, stop that. The game wants us moving, and I've already written a solid conclusion to this chapter, so I'll cooperate. We also get a routine fight with Akari, who now has a Mime Jr. Shit, I guess that's the conclusion now. I didn't want to end on the words Mime Jr. Wait. Hi, thank you so much for watching. As you could probably tell, this is part 1 of a much longer video that's been in production for about a year now called Deconstructing Pokemon Legends Arceus. That video should be released by summer, but I thought I'd try to get something out earlier to get my foot in the door. Ultimately, earlier turned out to be April, and something turned out to be about 78 minutes of video. I'm so sorry to anyone who thought this video would be out like 4 months ago. Production on chapters 2 through 8 is currently in progress, but if you're interested in becoming a proofreader, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. I'm looking to have different proofreaders on every chapter so I can get multiple perspectives on my writing without having multiple people read through a script that was, before revisions, 12 hours long. This video would have been 2.5. Even if you can't proofread, I would be grateful for any constructive feedback in the comments. Part of why I released this video is to head off any disastrous errors or structural flaws before they ruin the entire project. Once said project is complete, I'll be posting it 1 week early to my Ko-fi for people who donate $3 a month. You only have to be an active donor when it releases to gain access, and I'll make sure to update you all with the release date well in advance on my community tab and in my Discord server. In fact, I'll be providing community tab update posts semi-frequently, so if you like this video, you should subscribe for that. I won't clog up your home tab, promise. Finally, while you're down there, a like and a comment would help me out a bunch, and if you think this video is worth $5, you could consider making a one-time donation to my Ko-fi. No pressure, of course. This was a passion project first and foremost, and the fact that it exists is more than enough for me. Regardless, I appreciate you, and I hope you'll stick around for Deconstructing Pokemon Legends Arceus.